أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع لذنوبنا وتبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله. أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم واذكر في الكتاب إبراهيم إنه كان صديقا نبيا آمنا به صدق الله العلي العظيم. Respected elders, scholars, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is of course a pleasure to see each and every one of you again. To carry on our discussions we've had in the previous weeks, we began examining the life of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. And where we left off last week was we discussed his first dialogue, his first debate that he had with the priests, along with his uncle Azar. And when he finished his dialogue with the priests, when he first time witnessed them worshipping the idols, Azar quickly took him home and sat him down. And when Azar sat him down, Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam then begins to admonish his uncle. His uncle has enough of Nabi Ibrahim and exiles him from his home. He removes him from his house. Otherwise, if Ibrahim was to carry on living with his uncle in the same property, his uncle said to him very clearly that I will punish you until I kill you. So Ibrahim alayhi salam packs his things and he leaves. Now history doesn't tell us what happens or how many years go by or how many months even. But they say that during this time, Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam becomes a youth and he marries his cousin Sarah. They say Sarah, she inherited a lot of wealth from her deceased father. Sarah and her brother Nabi Lut alayhi salam, as well as their mother Ruqayya, they inherited a lot of money from his business and whatnot. So the father passes away, Sarah inherits a lot of wealth, she marries Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. And just like how Khadija salamullahi alayha supported Rasulullah, through her wealth, Sarah begins to support the movement of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. So Nabi Ibrahim becomes a very affluent individual in his society. He owns plots, he owns lands, and he owns many sheep and herds and cattle. They say through one of these businesses or transactions he made, was he bought a plot of land which was just outside of Babylon, for 100 sheep. So he paid a sum of 100 sheep to buy a plot of land which is known as Najaf al-Ashraf today. And he says that from this land, 70,000 individuals will be raised on the day of resurrection, and without hisab, they will enter the kingdom of heaven. During this time, they say approximately 3 years before he leaves the house of his uncle and before he encounters Nimrod, 3 years passes by. And within those 3 years, he constantly engages in debating with the priests along with his uncle Azar. Now what's interesting is before he used to sit down with his uncle, admonish his uncle, it was private, it was behind closed doors. But after he was kicked out from his uncle's house, he would challenge his uncle publicly in front of all the other priests. So it would anger his uncle Azar. They say the Quran, what it does is, the Quran in 3 different locations. Number 1 in Surah Al-Shu'ara, number 2 in Surah Al-Ankabut, and number 3 in Surah Al-Anbiya, highlights 3 of these debates that he has with the priests as well as the common people of Babylon. The Quran, in a beautiful way, begins to repeat many of these discussions. The same words are used, the same concepts are used, the same articulation of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam are used. And And it's not to say that the Quran repeats itself. It's to say and highlight that when Ibrahim used to question them, asking the same series of questions, he would not be left or he would not be given satisfactory answers. And so he would constantly rephrase the question and shoot it back towards them. In Surah Al-Shu'ara, beautiful discussion. They say Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, he enters the temple once again. And he used to do this quite frequently. He would debate with the chiefs of his society, the priests, the ulama of his time. He would enter the temple and he would wait for them to begin their ceremonies. When they would begin their ceremonies, he would then confront them and he would say to them, "Ma ta'budun?" What is it that you're worshipping? And we expressed why this particular phrase is important. He did not recognize their idols as individuals or gods, but rather as things. What are you worshipping? Not who you are worshipping. He said, "What are you worshipping?" And they would say, "We are worshipping idols." He says, "Why are you worshipping these idols?" He says, "Because these idols were worshipped by our forefathers." Upon which Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam says, "Wallah, your forefathers are my enemies and the enemies of my Lord." And then he goes on to explain. He would say that the Lord that I worship is the one who has created me and has guided me. The Lord that I worship is the one who feeds me and quenches my thirst. هو الذي يطعمني ويسقين. Your idols, neither have they created you, nor have they guided you. Number two, your idols are not in charge of the risk that comes into your hands. They don't provide for you food, nor do they provide for you water. Number three, he says, إِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينَ. My Lord is the one, when I become sick, He provides a cure for my diseases and my illnesses. Your idols, on the other hand, they don't do anything for you. He says, number four, my Lord is the one who will make me die or make me leave this world, and He will revive me on the day of judgment. Whereas your idols have no such power whatsoever. When they hear these words coming from Nabi Ibrahim, remember Nabi Ibrahim is only 15, 16 years of age. He's challenging the highest priests in those temples. They become angered by his confidence and by his conviction in the belief of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what's interesting is what comes afterwards. They say that Nabi Ibrahim, as he's standing in front of these priests, describing the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Essentially, this is what Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam is doing. He's describing the sifat of Allah. And as he goes into describing the sifat of Allah, he loses himself. The prophets were known to do this. When they would speak about Allah, they would only think about Allah. And then they would go into this whole different realm talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the Holy Quran, when Allah speaks with Nabi Musa has the most mundane of conversations with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says to Nabi Musa, he says, "Oh Musa, what's in your hand?" He says, "Ya Allah, in my hand is this stick. And I use this stick to strike the wood. And I use this stick to clean. And I use this stick to guide the cattle." Baba, you're talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why are you describing what you do with the stick? It's because they used to love talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Nabi Ibrahim would begin to describe the sifat of Allah, he was lost. He did not see himself standing before the high priests. He would go on to then say, on the day of judgment. He would say, "Ya Allah, grant me a good reputation." Remember, he's debating with the priests. Now he's supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in front of the priests. He says, "Ya Allah, grant me a good reputation, that the people after me remember me they have a good mentioning of me." He says, "Ya Allah, make sure that I inherit the kingdom of heaven. Ya Allah, when you raise me on the day of judgment, do not disgrace me." Why? He says, "Because my uncle Azar has lost his way. إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ." He says he is lost. He is in the state of manifest error. Ya Allah, guide him because he is drowning in darkness. But do not raise me on the day of judgment in a state of disgrace. He says, Ya Allah, these people, guide them one by one. On the day of judgment, Jannah is only for the muttaqeen. And then he begins to describe the idol worshippers and their positions in hell. He says, on the day of judgment, the idol worshippers, they will be raised and they will be punished. The angels will come to them and say, where are your gods that you used to call out to? Go on, call out to them now and see that they will not benefit you, nay, nor do they benefit themselves. And the angels will take them by their faces and they will throw them in the deepest levels of hell. Ibrahim is now speaking all of this in front of them, 15, 16 years of age. They are lost. They don't have any reply against Nabi Ibrahim. They don't know what to say. Ibrahim comes back to reality. He sees that he's standing in front of these priests again. He finishes his kalam, his hadith, and he turns around and he walks out. He exits the temple immediately. This is the first debate that he has, which is recorded within the Quran. The greatest level, or one of the identifications of Ibrahim, if you want to understand the mysticism of Nabi Ibrahim, it's these sets of verses. How he was lost in his words, just talking about Allah, supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was the first debate that he has with the priests. The second debate is the debate that he has with the commoners. And this is mentioned in Surah Al-Ankabut. Very interesting debate. It's not with the priests, but it's with the local businessmen, the people, the shopkeepers, and so on and so forth. One day he's walking, he sees a group of people worshipping idols. He comes towards them and he says to them, what are you worshipping? He says, we're worshipping idols. He says, why? He says, because these idols, they are in charge of our rizq. They are in charge of the wealth that comes into our hands. This discussion is a completely different discussion that Ibrahim approaches from a different perspective altogether. These commoners, they used to worship idols because rizq came from these idols. This is what they believed in. Ibrahim says, deep down, you commoners, you don't believe in the authority of these idols. The priests, my uncle, Nimrod, they believe in the authority of these idols. But you do not believe in the authority of these idols. When you go towards your temples and you pray, you pretend to pray. Why? He says, because when you look at them, the people, the elite of your society, they have the fame, they have the power, they have the influence, everything is in their hands. Dunya is in their hands. You don't have it in your hands. So you turn towards them, you see what they have and what they do, and you mimic it, thinking that it will also come into your lives as well. You ask yourself, what is it that they do that I'm not doing? They have provided, they have been in service of these idols their entire lives. So you think that I should submit to these idols, therefore I will be rewarded with rizq. He says, if you come towards the one God, Allah will open up the samawat wal ard for you. If you turn towards Allah and thank Him for what you have, Allah will give you more and more. Stay away from worshipping these idols. Ibrahim highlights a very important, pertinent point. He says the elite of our society controls us. They control you through the worship of these idols. They come towards you, they manufacture idols, they sell it off to you, and you buy them. You pay them for these idols. You give them the power that they have. It says they come towards you and they tell you, come, let's go towards the temples. And they will concoct, they will make up certain rituals just to keep control over you. And you'll follow them, thinking that it will open doors of rizq for you. Look at our time, for example, contemporary 21st century. The media industry, the news industry, the fashion industry, technology, everything is controlled by the elites. Even the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Their society was controlled by the Quraysh. The Quraysh were what? They were the elite of their time. They were the billionaires of their time, and they controlled every dimension of society. Every aspect of society was in their hands. If you look towards Quraysh and how they used to run Mecca, they say the Kaaba was filled with idols. Because the Kaaba was the central of Hijaz, once a year they would perform Hajj. People from all around would come towards Mecca, and they generated millions during that season of Hajj. They generated millions. They were the millionaires and the billionaires of their time, and they controlled and they had power in society. And what's beautiful is that even those who controlled society, these elite, they never believed in the authority of idols themselves. You look at the likeness of Fir'aun, look at the likeness of Nimrod. Nimrod, next week we'll talk about Nimrod. He used to call himself Rabbukumul A'la. I am your highest Lord. You think someone like him would put his knees in front of an idol? Azar used to manufacture idols. He used to sell them. If he had chosen Ibrahim alayhi salam and entered his message, entered his religion, his business would have to be forfeited. His station being the right-hand man, the close confidant of Nimrod, that would be taken away from him. His life was at threat. His quality, his standard of living was at threat. That's why he fought Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. The Quraysh of Mecca, none of them believed in the authority of idols. They fought Rasulullah because their life was threatened by him. There's a beautiful discussion between Abu Jahl and Walid ibn Mughira. Walid ibn Mughira, behind closed doors, he says to Abu Jahl, do you believe in the message of your nephew? He says, of course I do. He says, I do believe in the message of Rasulullah. The Quran, لولا نزل هذا القرآن على رجل من القريتين العظيم. Why was this Quran not revealed to a man of importance, to a man of fame, a man who is well known both in Mecca and Ta'if? Why was it given to a man, a shepherd like Muhammad? We are more deserving of the Quran. They used to believe in the authority of the Quran. He says, Ya Abu Jahl, don't go into the streets saying this to the people. They will kill you. Abu Jahl says, don't worry. Our life is not threatened by Rasulullah. And they fought him until the very end because their quality and their standard of living was threatened by the Prophet of Islam. And likewise, in the life of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, just as how we have elites controlling our societies, this is not new. This is something that existed even in the time of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. So this is the second debate that he has, recorded in the Quran. The third debate is the debate that he has again with the priests and Azar. They say one day he comes towards the temple, he enters the temple. Ma ta'abudun, what are you worshipping? They say to him, Ya Ibrahim, we worship these idols. He says, why do you worship these idols? Again, the Quran repeats the same arguments. Why? Because Nabi Ibrahim is never given a satisfactory answer. That's why he keeps beating them with the same questions. Give me something that I'm satisfied with. He says, why do you worship these idols? He says, we worship these idols because our forefathers used to worship them. Nabi Ibrahim says, look, what makes you think that your forefathers were correct? We live in a community. We have certain things that we've inherited from our forefathers. This is how we govern our communities. Every community in the world is governed in such a way that the values of our forefathers are preserved. Nabi Ibrahim flips the whole argument over. He says, what if your forefathers were in the state of dhalalim mubin? What if they were wrong? And they were wrong. And you're following their same footprints. So not only were they drowning in the sea of darkness, but you're also drowning in the sea of darkness. They say to Nabi Ibrahim, they say, Ya Ibrahim, have you come to guide us? Do you have the truth in your hands? Or have you come to play games with us? Are you here to give us the truth? Or are you just mucking about? So Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam says to them, he says, Bal Rabbukum, indeed your Lord, Rabbus samawat wal ard alladhi fatarahunna. He says, your Lord is the Lord who has created the heavens and the earth. And he says, وَأَنَا عَلَى ذَلِكُمْ مِنَ الشَّاهِدِينَ. And indeed, I am a witness to that he is the one who created everything from nothing. And what's beautiful here is that Nabi Ibrahim says it with such passion and such confidence and such conviction, it irritates them. Sometimes the religious are targeted. Why? Because those who are far from religion, they are annoyed by the behaviors of the religious ones. Look at the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. The Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam were victims. What were they? They were pious individuals. They weren't warmongers. Yet their enemies saw them as a threat, even if they lived peacefully. Each and every members of the Ahl al-Bayt were victims of hasad, victims of jealousy. They were irritated by the confidence and the conviction of Nabi Ibrahim. How can a young man reject our idols and at the same time have such confidence in the belief of one God? Then Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. After these verses, Nabi Ibrahim then says to them, actually he doesn't say this to them, he says this under his breath. He says, Tallahi la'akidanna. He says, by God, I swear upon God that I will plot a plan against your idols. I will do something against your idols that even you will not believe. And this is, of course, the breaking of the idols. And they say, in Surah, for example, Safat, Allah then begins to narrate the incident of the temple. When Azar one day comes towards his nephew Ibrahim alayhi salam. He comes towards Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam and he says to him, Ya Ibrahim, let's go towards the festival that will be held during the night. Actually, you know what? I'll postpone this story for next week, inshallah. They say that Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam was a youth. He was only 15 or 16 years of age. And what we learn from this is that we should never underestimate the youth of our communities. Sometimes authority should be given to the youths of our communities. They should be given certain responsibilities because they can move the community forward. They can bring fresh changes which can be good for all. When a youth is given certain responsibilities, it can have a profound effect in the way he lives his life, physically, emotionally, as well as spiritually. We should never underestimate the power that the youth have in their hands. Nabi Ibrahim was a youth when he confronted Nimrud and his uncle Azar. Likewise, Rasulullah was a youth when changes were made within Hijaz. Amir al-Mu'mineen was the youth when he was appointed in Ghadir Khum. The youth have a lot of power and they should never be underestimated spiritually either. There's a beautiful story. Sayyid Muhammad Kadhim al-Yazdi. Sayyid Muhammad Kadhim al-Yazdi, one of our greatest maraj. We are proud to have an individual like him represent us. Passed away in 1919. He's buried in the haram of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. He say he was from the lands of Yazd in Iran. He studied many years in Najaf. He's written a book by the name of Urwat al-Wuthqa. There is not a single marja that has come except that they have written a sharh, an exegesis of this book, Urwat al-Wuthqa. Sayyid al-Sistani, may Allah lengthen his life, has written a ta'liq, has written a commentary on Urwat al-Wuthqa. Likewise, Sayyid al-Khu'i, rahmatullah alayh. Likewise, Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim, rahmatullah alayh. Likewise, al-Shaheed Muhammad Bakir as-Sadr, the greatest of our maraja that have come, have all written a commentary on this book, Urwat al-Wuthqa. So imagine the position of a man who sets the tone of the newer generations of maraja'iyya. This was a profound personality. He's old, very old man. He says, look, my time in this world has come to an end. Let me prepare for my death. So he takes his kafan, he comes to a very close friend and he tells his friend, go and write the entire Quran on this kafan of mine. But I want you to write this Quran on my kafan next to the dhari of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. It says it took the man an entire month. He wrote the entire Quran on the kafan of Sayyid Muhammad Kadhim al-Yazdi, alongside the haram of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. When this was completed, he came, he gave the kafan. He said, I took my kafan and I went to Karbala. In Karbala, I took one of my friends And I said to him, write Ziyarat al-Ashura on my coffin alongside the grave of Abu Abdullah. Ziyarat al-Ashura, Hadith al-Qudsi, should never be underestimated. And he writes Ziyarat al-Ashura on the coffin of Sayyid Muhammad Kadhim al-Yazdi. He takes the coffin after it's completed, he takes the coffin and he goes towards Yazd, his home city in Iran. When he arrives, he spends a few days, he rests. He goes to sleep one night. In Alim al-Ru'ya, in his dream, he sees Abu Abdullah alayhi salam standing in front of him. He says, Sayyid Muhammad Kadhim, Salamun alaykum, alaykum as-salam, ya Sayyidi wa ya Mawlaya. He says, take your coffin and give it to the one who is known as Al-Kareem. And then he wakes up from his sleep. He says, who is this Al-Kareem? In the morning, he asks around his friends, his neighbors, his extended family, everyone that he knows, who is Al-Kareem? It's a big city. Who is this person known as Al-Kareem? Everyone tells him, we don't know. He says, Ya Allah, tell me who is this Al-Kareem? Second night, he goes to sleep. Again, he sees Abu Abdullah in his dream. He says, Ya Sayyid Muhammad, I've told you, give your coffin to the one who is known as Al-Kareem. He says, who is this Al-Kareem? He wakes up. He says, when I woke up, I felt a distinct feeling in my heart that I should travel towards one direction. So I took my coffin, Ilham. I took my coffin and I went towards that direction. I kept going and going and going and going until I saw a small house. It was a house where they would perform the ghusl of the amwat. He said, I came and I knocked on the door. When I knocked on the door, a young man, a youth, probably in his early 20s, he opens the door. He looks at me, he says, Sayyid Muhammad Kadhim, Assalamu alaykum. Give me the coffin so I can prepare the janazah. He said, I was baffled. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't say anything to the boy. I gave him my coffin. He took my coffin and he came inside. But before going in, he saw my face and he saw that I was baffled. I was worried. He says, Sayyid Muhammad Kadhim, do not be worried. The one who came to you and said to you, go and give your coffin to Al-Kareem, is the same one who came to me and said, go to Al-Kareem and perform ghusl on his body. Sayyid Muhammad Kadhim, he says, can I come in? I want to see, who is this mayyit? He said, come. He took him inside into the place where they performed the ghusl, and he saw a middle-aged man passed away. In the same room, his son was standing alongside the body of his father. So he came towards his son. He said, is this mayyit your father? He said, is my father. He said, tell me something about your father. Because Abu Abdullah came into my dream to be at the service of this mayyit. Tell me something about your father. What did he do as an occupation? Was he an alim? Was he a philosopher? Was he this? Was he that? He says, no, my father was a hammal. You know what's an hammal? You know, when you go to Najaf or Karbala or any of these Middle Eastern countries or Eastern countries, you come out of the airplane and you have all of these people carrying your luggages. He's an hammal. He said, my father used to carry the luggages of the travelers. He said, what was so special about your father? Tell me. He said, my father, every morning when he used to wake up, he would say, Assalamu alayka ya Abu Abdullah. And every night before ending his day, he would say, Assalamu alayka ya Abu Abdullah. Sayyid Muhammad Kadhim al-Yazdi, great marja ad-deen. He's the father of all of our maraja today, teacher of all of our maraja. Old man. He was commanded by Imam al-Husayn to provide kafan. But then you have a youth who was commanded by Abu Abdullah to provide ghusl. Never underestimate the spirituality of our youths. And of course, if we take our minds towards Karbala, there is one youth that we remind ourselves of. Aliyun al-Akbar. The fuel of the fire of Karbala is because of the youths of the Bani Hashim. They say that when Abu Abdullah alayhi salam came towards the body of Aliyun al-Akbar, he saw the face of Ali, and Ali would be smiling one moment and he would be crying another. And he would say to his son, Ya Ali, tell me, why do you smile and why do you cry? Upon which he said, oh my father, when I look towards one direction, I see Rasulullah. He's come to me with a glass of water, with some water in his hands from the kingdom of heavens. He says, oh my son, tell me, why do you cry? He says, I see on my left side, I see my grandmother, she's sitting alongside me. She sees your face, oh my father. She strikes her face, calling out, Wa Husayna, Wa Husayna. They say that when Ali al-Akbar left this world, it was Zainab who came running towards the body of Ali. She threw herself on the body of her nephew. She doesn't do this for Qasim. She doesn't do this for her brothers. She doesn't do this for the body of, for example, Ali al-Asghar or Abdullah, the son of Imam al-Hassan, or for her own sons. But she throws herself on the body of Ali al-Akbar. Abu Abdullah then has to take her hand away from the body of her son and bring her back towards the tents. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant our marhumin the shafa'ah of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. And of course we pray for all the mardah. May Allah cure them from the sicknesses. May Allah give them shafa'ah. And of course may Allah hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time. عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. Surah Al-Mubarakat Al-Fatiha.